I think that they did a great job. I'd never heard that last song, did y'all? No. Never ever before. Cooper, is my mic on at all?
It's not on my end. That's why. So anyway, the only reason I have a mic is for the camera. Okay, so don't feel like I'm super cool or like I need to feel super cool by having a mic or anything. We are recording these and then putting them on YouTube for the people that aren't able to be here. And so if you don't get to catch Wednesday night one week and you want to know what was talked about, go to YouTube and you can watch that on there. We won't be posting those to IGTV just because they're like 45 minutes and nobody's going to watch that on IGTV, right? And so we're going to try to keep everything that we post on Instagram less than 10 minutes. Okay, so 10-minute maximum is the longest video that we'll post on Instagram. So anyway, Austin, is this yours?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I just didn't want to like get my germs and my spit on it. That's really why I moved this front row so I didn't spit on them anymore. So tonight is Who Is This Jesus Part 2. So be honest with me. Did anybody watch the video that we posted last Friday? Kathryn, Megan watched the first half? Okay, awesome. So that's awesome, and I'm glad that y'all were honest. But this is the sermon that goes with last Friday's video. Alright? And so last Friday's video was an application video, something that we'll do every once in a while, how to better apply what was talked about into your world and into your life. But this is the lesson that goes with that. Last week I ran a fever on Tuesday night. And so I went and got tested for COVID, and the doctor said to not even be around Allie and Judah for that 24 hours or 38 hours until I got my test results back. And so we're doing everything for precaution and for protection of y'all, but I came back negative, so that's good. And then I got to come out of the room, and as soon as I came out of the room, I got in the shower and then came to work. So it was a weird 38 hours, literally sat in my bed the whole time, except for when I got up to go to the bathroom, which was only like 4 times. And I played games on my phone, and I watched movies. So that was good, right? I liked that time, but it sucked. So I am glad that Cecily is flexible and awesome, and so hopefully y'all enjoyed what she led y'all through last week. I think that that's super important to have practice of prayer. If you don't ever know, not only know how to pray, the best way to know how to pray and get to know how to pray is to practice praying and having guided prompts like that. And so I think that she did a really good job with that. I'm super glad that she is at Columbus, for sure. Are y'all glad that she's here? Yeah? Okay, good. All right. Has anyone in here ever tried to speak something into existence or to like say words, Sterling, wake up, and make something happen? So, has anybody ever tried to do that?
Yes.
Yes? Like, for me, room be clean.
If my room could be clean after I said room be clean, I think, yeah, just like that.
There's good. Anyway, if I ever said just room be clean and my room was clean, that would be awesome because my room is and was filthy, right? And it'd be so easy to just be saying room be clean. Allie, I know, would really appreciate this one. If she could say legs be shaved,
or like you wouldn't have to continue. And it would maybe it is. Clap on, clap off. Okay. All right.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, be like Mike work, right? Or be like legs be shaved and never shaved. It would make life a whole lot easier for Allie, and I'm sure most of the girls in this room, and even maybe Zach. Making life easier for him too. But if you could say homework, finish yourself, and your homework was done, that would be great because then you wouldn't have to spend unforeseen amount of hours. Huh?
You go to school and learn.
You go to school and learn. Anyway, if you say that you haven't done something like that, then I would call you a liar, because I feel like at some point in our life, whether you care to admit it or not, you have tried to speak something into existence, or speak something to be done and wish that it be done. Right. Who in here has ever watched The Office? Okay, all right. So in The Office, Michael Scott at one point figures out that he doesn't have any money left, and he says, "I declare bankruptcy." He's like, "I declare it. It's happened. I have declared bankruptcy." That's not how it works, right? And if we try to declare something, if we try to say something or speak something into existence, we're going to look, especially in public, we're going to look a lot like Michael did, and he looked dumb, silly, stupid in that instance, right? And so that's how we look, but we're going to look at a story that didn't turn out that way. Okay, so Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41 is where we're going to be.
Turn it
And
on, it's off. You turn it off.
do I have to hold the button down?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, is it on now?
Hello?
Yes.
I
He
think
has
it's
a
on
really
now.
bad habit of turning the mic all the way up, doesn't he?
Well, I want to make sure it works.
All right, so we're going to look at a passage in Mark chapter 4, verse 35 through 41 is where we're going to be. We're going to work through that whole passage, and we'll read pieces of it at a time, but we're going to jump in. Mark chapter 4, verse 35. The first three words are, "on this day." Okay? On this day. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. So we didn't get very far into the passage, but one thing that I think is super important is that when we start reading a new passage, especially in our Bibles today, where it has like the subtitles of each passage, and it has the paragraph mark and all that kind of stuff, like it has the parable of the sower, and at the beginning of Mark chapter 4, and then it has the purpose of the parables, and then it has a lamp under a basket, and then it has a parable of seed growing, a parable of a mustard seed, all those titles right there. When it has something like "on this day" at the beginning of a passage like that, or at the beginning of a verse even, it's important to ask yourself a particular question. It's important to pay attention to those beginnings, because if we don't know why they're there, if we don't know what they mean, we're not getting the full power of that passage. Okay, so another instance that this could happen in is if you see the word "therefore" at the beginning of a passage, or at the beginning of a scripture that you're reading, you should automatically stop and ask yourself the question, why is the "therefore" therefore? Or what is the "therefore" therefore? And so you go back and you look at what the reasoning behind the "therefore" is, so that you can better understand that passage, so that you can better understand the application of that particular verse, what the reason that it was written is, and all this kind of stuff. Why the "therefore" is "therefore." Okay? Or the phrase "for this reason." If it's "for this reason," comma, and then the rest of the passage, you need to stop and you need to ask yourself the question, for what reason? So that you can better determine what the passage is about, who the passage was written to, how to better apply it to your life. And so when we see the phrase "on that day," what's the question that we need to ask ourselves?
On what day?
On what day? Right? So that we can better understand what is happening, we have to ask ourselves a question, on what day? Okay? This one, it has a pretty simple answer to it. It's simply the end of the day from the previous passage. Okay? So the end of the day is closing from the previous passage. And so Jesus was teaching the parable of the sower, the purpose of the parables, the parable of the mustard seed, the parable of the seed growing, the lamp under a basket. He was teaching all these different kind of things. And so on this day, or on that day, is what it's talking about. Okay? So on that day, when evening had come, is the rest of verse 35. So let's read that. Mark 4, 35 and 36 is what we're going to read. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and the other boats were with them. Why do you think that Jesus wanted to go to the other side of the sea? Why do you think that Jesus wanted to go to the other side of the sea? And this is a question that I often, or that when I read this passage, especially preparing for tonight and every other time that I've read it before, I've asked myself, why does he want to go to the other side of the sea? And there's two main schools of thought here, okay? One is that on the western side where they were located at this point, there are a ton of people, there are a ton of big cities, and so they wanted to, first option is they wanted to flee from the people and go and be by themselves, go and be in this quiet place where they could focus on each other and just be together or not have people, all these people around. That's one option. The second option is that he wanted to extend, I don't need a mic, you're good, extend his ministry. We'll figure it out later. That he wanted to extend his ministry. So at this point in his ministry, he hadn't been over to the eastern side of the sea. He hadn't been to that side. So he might have just been going over there to reach those people that he had not reached at this point. Do you think one of those reasons is better than the other reason? No? It's just a toss-up, right? And I agree that it's just a toss-up. Neither one of those reasons is a bad reason. One is not better than the other one. It's just two different schools of thought on why he could have been going to the other side of the sea. So it doesn't really matter. They're both plausible. It doesn't matter why he was going to the other side of the sea. It just says that he's going to the other side of the sea. So another question that I asked myself is, why were the boats right there? They were right beside the boats. And if you read this, they got on the boats. It doesn't say that they had to walk 5 hours to the boats, or they didn't have to untie the boats from the dock, or they didn't have to walk down to the marina and get in the boat, or whatever. The boats were right there. And so why were the boats right there? You remember when Jesus called the disciples? What were the several of these disciples doing when he called them to come with him? Fishing, right? They were cleaning out their nets and he said, "Come and I will make you fishers of men." These men, their livelihood revolved around these boats. And just because Jesus had asked or commanded them to come and follow him, that didn't change. They were following Jesus with everything they were, yeah. But they were also still fishing to provide food for themselves, to provide food for their families, to provide food for the disciples. And so these boats were right there. And they got in these boats so that they could go across to the other side of the sea. And Mark does something that's very uncharacteristic for him in the end of verse 36. And he says, "Just as he was, and the other boats were with him." And this is uncharacteristic for Mark, because Mark is not a detail-oriented guy. If you look at Mark and Luke, or if you look at all three of the synoptic gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they share 97% of the same material between the three gospels. If you look at all three of them, Mark has the least amount of detail. And so when he says, "just as he was," and the other boats were there with him, that's not a thing to just say, okay, just as he was, and there were other boats, they weren't by themselves. It's something that we need to pay attention to. It's not, it doesn't change who Jesus is, but it's something that we need to pay attention to. What does this phrase, "just as he was," mean? There's two options here. Does it mean that Jesus didn't shower and didn't change clothes before he got in the boat? Or does it mean that he didn't go and be with the people after he got done teaching? He just got on the boat. Number two, he didn't go and hang out with people. He didn't go and just walk through the village after he got done teaching. He didn't even step on shore. Most theologians think that Jesus was probably in another part of the gospel. It tells us that Jesus was doing this. He stood on the boat and pushed the boat out into the water so that he could teach and not be surrounded by these people and be on some sort of a thing, kind of like a stage, so that people could see him in the first place.
And so just as he was, Jesus got on this boat, just as they were. They got on this boat, and the other boats were there with them, and they started to cross the sea. Mark 4:37 says, "And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, or were crashing into the boat, so that the boat was already filling." Does anybody in here know much about the Sea of Galilee? No? It is really stormy. And the reason, the unusual part about the Sea of Galilee is that it sits at 690 feet below sea level. Okay? So the Sea of Galilee sits at 690 feet below sea level, which is really odd, right? And the geographical or topographical makeup of that region is like the Sea of Galilee has a mouth, and then on the inside it's a big bowl. It's surrounded by mountains. And so these two things come together, and it means that when it's windy, this wind is just going to swirl around in this bowl. And it's just going to stay in there, and it's just going to keep going around. So if there's a lot of wind coming into the Sea of Galilee, it's not going to have anywhere to escape. It's just going to continue swirling. And when there's wind and there's water, what happens? A storm happens, right? And their waves are created. And so these waves get big enough, and there's enough wind, and to where these waves start crashing into the boat. And these waves start filling up the boat because they're crashing into the boat. The waves just got so big, and it happened to be so windy. This storm was so bad that the disciples were scared. And it says later on in verse 38 that he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion, and they woke him and said, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Do you not care that we are going to die?" And that's significant to pay attention to, because we answered what these men did before, right? What were these men doing? Or what had these men been their whole lives? Fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. So they were used to this, right? It's not like they hadn't ever been in a storm on the Sea of Galilee. This is something that they experienced throughout their whole life. As kids growing up, they were on a boat in the middle of the Sea of Galilee when a storm was happening. So this wasn't a change for them. This wasn't something new for them. It's something that they had been through their whole lives, but they were scared of this. They said, "Master, do you not care that we're perishing? Do you not care that we're going to die?" These dudes think that they're going to die, and another one is sleeping through it all. He has his head on a cushion and is asleep through it all. That's another small detail, that he had his head on a cushion, so uncharacteristic of Mark. But this wasn't just like a nap. Like when I take a nap, I wake up pretty easy, right? If Charlie barks or if Judah comes and slaps me on the face, like I wake up. And most people, I feel like, are pretty easily awoken, especially from a nap type of sleep. But this was some deep sleep that Jesus was in. This is like my dad on a Sunday afternoon when there's nothing but a golf tournament on, and he is in his recliner and he's just like mouth open, and it's like when you one of your friends is asleep like this is the time that you take Cheetos and you see how many Cheetos you can get in their mouth before they wake up. Or you take gummy worms and you place gummy worms all over their face until they wake up, and you see how many gummy worms you can get. I did this on the flight back from Spain to David Villarreal, and I got 5 gummy worms on his face. And he woke up and he felt the gummy worms, and gummy worms fell off in his hand, and then he just ate all the gummy worms. He didn't even think about it, just put the gummy worms in his mouth. And he was like, "Did I just eat the gummy worms that were on my face for I don't know?" "Yes, David, you just ate those gummy worms." And so it was great. And so this sleep that Jesus was in was super deep, was some powerful sleep. He wasn't waking up when the storm was crashing and the boat was crashing against the water, the waves were crashing against the boat. He didn't wake up, and this was some serious storms going on. But then it said they woke him in verse 38. It said they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And in verse 39, it says, "And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, 'Peace, be still.' And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm." Hush, be still, or peace, be still, is really, really harsh. Okay? It depends on what version you have, on what way it translates that, but it's a really harsh way of saying peace, be still. It's like, it could be also translated like be silent or be muzzled. In today's language, if you're reading the Message version, it probably says this: "Shut up! Be still! Be quiet." Jesus wasn't messing around when he was talking to the storm. When he was commanding this storm, he wasn't messing around. And the sea immediately becomes still. Up to this point, Jesus had cast out demons. He had healed people. But here he shows that he doesn't only have power over people, that he doesn't only have power over the spiritual realm of things, but that he has power over nature. He has power over the whole world. It shows his omnipotence. It shows that he is all powerful. It's like saying room be clean, legs be shaved, or traffic be gone. If you've ever lived in Houston, you wish you could say that. But it's like Jesus being in traffic, or saying legs be shaved, or room be clean, or homework be done, and it's done. Verse 40 and 41 says, "And he said to them, 'Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?' And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, 'Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?'" Jesus could ask the question, do you still not have faith? Have you still no faith? Because he was asleep through the storm. He had faith that God was going to protect him, was going to protect them. And if they did die, then it was God's plan. Jesus had that faith. But the disciples didn't. The disciples had been with Jesus when he cast these demons out, when he healed people, when he rubbed mud on a blind dude's eyes and then washed the mud off, and the dude had his sight. Like, they saw these things. They saw these things. And they still didn't have the faith. But Jesus demonstrated what kind of faith we need to have in every instance. And it says that they were very afraid. And they said, "Who then is this man that even the wind and the seas obey him?" They have a very real understanding of who Jesus is now. Even the wind and the seas obey him. If somebody in your class walked out into a rainstorm and just said, "Peace, be still," and the rain stopped and the sun came out and a Tweety bird landed on their shoulder, like, what would you think about that person? They're crazy, okay? Something's different about that person. There's something different about that person. So maybe the disciples were like, "Man, Jesus is crazy." Right? They might have been like, "This dude is crazy." Right? They could have been. But I think if I was right there beside Jesus and he said, "Peace, be still," to these waves, to the storm, and it was immediately gone, I would probably be pretty scared myself. So you might be saying, "Jake, like, this is a story that I learned about when I was in second grade. I've been hearing this story for every year that I've been in church for my entire life. I've heard this story. And I heard that Jesus can speak to the sea. And I know that Jesus can speak to the sea. And I know that he could have even spoken himself down off the cross and all of this kind of stuff. He could save the entire world and give the whole world food. Like, I know that Jesus has command and has power over everything in the world. What does this mean to me? Why should I look at my life any differently? Why should I go about life any differently now? Let me ask you a question. Who in here has ever felt overwhelmed with anything? Who in here has ever felt like you were drowning? Whether it's in a sea of depression or homework or chores or anxiety or a lack of self-confidence or gossip or whatever. Okay? Who in here has ever felt like they weren't good enough? Everyone in here raise their hands for all of those. That's why that we should listen to this. That's why that we should live our lives differently after reading this story. See, Jesus has the ability to not just speak to the physical storms that go on in the world, or that go on in our lives, or whatever, but he has the power over the storms in our daily walk. The power that goes, or the storms that go on inside of ourselves, inside of our own mind. He has power over those storms too. To the problems that we're having. He has power over those. Just like he did over that storm today. And he can say, shut up. Be gone. No, be gone. If we have the faith to let him do it. If you have the faith to let him do it. Or have the faith to believe that he can do it. I think that all of us in this room at one point or another have probably struggled with faith. And if you haven't ever struggled with your faith up to this point, there will come a day where you do struggle with your faith for some shape, form, or fashion of a reason. Right? For me, one of the things, many different times in my life have I struggled with my faith, but one of the in particular times that I struggled with my faith was when my granddad died. Like, I knew he was a great man. I knew that he was sick. I knew that he was a Jesus follower, and so I knew that he was in heaven, so I shouldn't have doubted that God was doing the right thing, but I did. When I was in the 3rd grade, I doubted that my parents loved me, or I doubted that God could use me in this time where my parents weren't around because they were both working 3 different jobs. And so I never got any time with my parents, and I was just by myself, and I was always by myself. And I got to the point where I didn't feel like I had any other way out than suicide. When I was in the 3rd grade. So I know that these are real things that happen in y'all's lives. If we have the faith, if we have the vision, if we have the reality that Jesus can speak to the storms of our lives just like he spoke to the storm on the Sea of Galilee, then it should change the way that we live. It should change the way that we walk. It should change the way that we talk. It should change everything in our life. That it seems ridiculous that the disciples didn't have the faith because the Son of God was right beside them, and they knew that the Son of God was right beside them. In the same way that it seems ridiculous to us, it seems ridiculous to them, and it will seem ridiculous to the people 3,000 years from now, why we don't trust God in these storms, because he's proved himself over and over and over again. He can make our storms go away. In Matthew 28:18 through 20, also known as the Great Commission, it says this: And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." I want you to pay special attention to verse 18 and then the second part of verse 20. So I'm going to read it like that, okay? And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. What does this mean? It means that we have been given the power to believe. It means that we have been given the authority through the Holy Spirit. When we come into a relationship with Jesus, we have the power that Jesus spoke to the storm with that day in us. We have the ability to have faith. We have the ability to trust. We should know beyond the shadow of a doubt that Jesus is going to take care of us when these storms come. Just like Jesus did. Remember what he was doing when the storm was coming? When the storm was at its peak and the disciples thought they were going to die, what was Jesus doing? Sleeping. So I think what we need to learn from Jesus in this passage, we can learn something from the disciples for sure, and we can also learn something from Jesus here. What we need to learn from Jesus is we need to learn how to sleep. We need to learn how to rest. Why? Because if we have that kind of rest, we have that kind of sleep, we have that kind of peace in our lives, that kind of sleep, that kind of rest that's happening, that our friends are trying to put Cheetos in our mouth, or throw goldfish into our mouth, or put gummy worms on our face, or whatever that is. If we're sleeping like that, if we're resting like that, it means that we have faith in God to take care of anything that will happen in our life. It means that we're going to trust in God to take care of those storms that come up, to take care of those moments in life that don't make sense to us, to take care of those storms that we're going to go through, whether it's a sea of depression or anxiety, or it's my boyfriend or girlfriend cheated on me. Whatever it is in that moment, whatever that storm is, we need to have the rest in God that he's going to make it okay. That his plan is better, his purpose is greater. So, 2 weeks ago we looked at the first part of who is this Jesus. And does anybody remember what that was? Who is this Jesus? Is the one that's born of a virgin, signifying that he's the one and only Son of God. So we know that Jesus is the only one that has ever been born of a virgin, signifying that he has the ability to take away our sin. That he is the Son of Man that was talked about in Daniel chapter 7. That he was the promised Emmanuel that was talked about in Isaiah. And now we see that this Jesus is the one who speaks to the storm and it listens. And he can speak to the storms in our life. He can speak to the problems in our life. And they will go away if we have the faith to let him do what he was put here to do. To take care of us. To walk with us. To hold us in his hand. And if we have the right kind of faith, it means that we can look at our problems and we can grab our problems that are going on and we can look at them and we can say, shut up, be gone, because you have no power here, because I'm filled with God.
I am filled with the power that has all authority in heaven and on earth. So what do you have? What Jesus do you know? Do you know the Jesus that gave you the power to speak to a storm? Or do you just know the Jesus that you celebrate on Easter and Christmas and maybe you talk about every once in a while when you come to church on Sunday morning? Which Jesus do you know? Life-changing Jesus or Sunday school Jesus? Let's pray. God, you're good. Thank you for the way that you have taken care of us and the way that you have given us the ability to know who you are. And I pray that as we go throughout this time, we will trust in you more. We will come to know who you are more and more. We will come to know you better and better. We will come to trust you more and more. We will come to have faith in you more and more, that you can speak to the storms. We will trust in you to handle those, God, and we will trust in you to take us through them. That you will give us the ability and the comfort to rest like Jesus was resting. He knew that you had a plan. He knew that you were going to take care of them. God, let us have that same peace and that same rest, God. And let us have the faith that Jesus can speak to every storm that comes up in our life. Let us have the knowledge, the head and heart knowledge that He will do it. That He can and He will. God, we love you and we trust you. Use us for your purpose and for your glory. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.